You're listening to Big World Network.
Just Kill Me, Episode 6, Phase 1. Written by Wendy Herman. Read by Wendy Herman. I had been to Rip's office in the government building a few times before, but I had a butterfly or two when I walked through the main entrance into the massive lobby for the first time as a trainee. I ran my fingers across the cool brick wall on the way to the elevators and smiled. I felt as though the building itself was welcoming me, that it had been waiting for my arrival for a long time. The butterflies ceased to flutter, and I confidently pushed the button to summon the elevator. Rip was standing right in front of the doors when they opened onto his floor, causing me to jump about a foot in the air. He loved doing that to people. Sometimes he was more boy than man, another one of his endearing qualities. He was grinning from ear to ear and held a steaming Starbucks cup in each hand. "You know I don't drink coffee," I reminded him, when my heart had resumed beating. He dipped his head in a goofy sort of bow and responded in his best British accent. "Milady, your chai tea latte with soy milk and a sprinkle of cinnamon," he said as he handed me the cup. My favorite indulgence. This was a special occasion, I thought, deciding whether or not to accept it. Rip stayed frozen in his half-bow, waiting for me to release him. "As you were, good Sir Knight," I played, but not attempting an accent. I wasn't about to start this monumental day by embarrassing myself too much. "How did you know I was on this elevator?" I inquired, happily taking the cup of sweet, delicious nectar. Just then I noticed some commotion over Rip's shoulder. An elderly woman was standing in the middle of a small crowd, complaining loudly and pointing toward Rip and me. She waved her arms in alarm and then clutched her chest as she relived her recent terror. "I didn't," he confessed. "I thought I gave that old bird a heart attack, but she's all right, just a little upset." He put a hand on my back and gently led me toward his office, attempting to leave the area before the woman could positively identify her assailant. "A little upset?" I laughed. "I think you poked an ornery bear with a stick." "All the more reason to turn tail and run," he responded, quickening his pace. I spent a few minutes with Rip in his office before I was supposed to report to the training center 2 floors below. Trevor had canceled our last weekly dinner with Rip, saying he didn't feel well, so I hadn't seen Rip since our lunch at Ariadne's. I didn't bring up my argument with Trevor, and Rip didn't ask how my currently bedroom-banned husband was, so I pushed it down as far as I could, along with all the emotions associated with it. Trevor would come around. Rip was responsible for all the training of new agents in the state, but I wouldn't be in his presence officially until I was through Phase 1, which was fine. For the time being, I was still just an old friend, sitting comfortably in his office, shooting the shit. This may be the last time I'm allowed in here for some time, I thought. Unless I really screw up. The idea of Rip scolding me, and meaning it, struck me as funny, but then I sobered. I was determined to not give him any reason to. Then, as we both stood, he gave me a friendly kiss on the cheek and said, "Now go get 'em." I gave a mock salute and performed an abysmal about-face, and skipped out of his office. It was like my first day of kindergarten, when everything was new and exciting. In just a few minutes I would be an FBI trainee, fully engaged in the first phase of the agent training program. I might have thought I was in a movie, or more likely dreaming, except for the fact that everything around me, potted plants, cubicles, people, were all so sharp and clear. If I had been dreaming, since my new and improved vision had kicked in on that fateful night, I decided right then and there I never wanted to wake up. I checked in at the training center and gave the agent at the desk a firm handshake, never wavering my eye contact with the rather short, stout man, one of the many tips from Rip on how to survive the first day. The man seemed pleased and gestured toward the classroom across the hall. The room was empty. I was the first one to check in. Score 1 for me. So it began. The next 2 weeks were filled with all the unpleasant but necessary stuff, as our primary trainer, Special Agent Moss, called it. She would disappear for hours while we filled out form after form, completed one computer training module after another on our current knowledge of operational security, strategy, and crisis reaction, and waited to be called out for our mandatory appointment with the agency psychiatrist. It was tedious and a little boring. Okay, it was positively mind-numbing, but I never complained. The 22 hopefuls quickly dwindled to 12 by the end of the second week. One young man, who had arrived the first day in a men-in-black type suit, hadn't even returned the next day. I thought he was trying to be funny, but it became immediately clear he had neither seen the movie nor had a sense of humor when I poked him and laughed. "Are you the best of the best of the best?" He avoided me the rest of the day. I dismissed the possibility that his withdrawal from the program had been due to my comment. Besides, if he was that sensitive, he wasn't cut out to be an agent anyway. I vaguely wondered what could possibly have scared off nearly half the group at this point. The fear of getting carpal tunnel? When I was called for my psych evaluation the morning of day 11, I left the doctor's office an hour later fairly sure I was much saner than he was, and confident I had passed with flying colors. Confident because the 50-something balding giant of a man had spent the 55-minute session asking my opinion on how to deal with his 17-year-old son, who was rebelling big time and had moved in with his 18-year-old boyfriend. Although I insisted I had no words of wisdom for his particular situation, he kept pushing until I was forced to resort to a few generic statements about accepting him for who he is, letting him make his own mistakes, and loving him no matter what, etc. I was pretty impressed with myself, as the supposed superior brain in the room scribbled furiously while I spoke. Seriously, he was taking notes? I knew I was good, but I had no idea I was that good. I returned to the classroom to find it empty except for Agent Moss, who was closing up all the computers. I walked over to my station and sat down. "I can close it up for you if you want. I dismissed everyone for the day," Agent Moss offered. She was so nice it freaked me out a little. I guess I expected a female agent to be, well, a bitch. I would have understood completely. She had conquered a man's world and didn't want any company on her pedestal. But Agent Moss was not what I expected at all. I really liked her, and was anxious to pick her brain, but hadn't found the right moment. "That's all right," I replied. "I wanted to finish up my security clearance application, if that's okay. I'm almost done with it." "You are?" She seemed surprised. "I just have the previous address section left," I responded, logging into my computer. She walked over to me. "Did you bring all the paperwork you need for that?" Oops, what had I missed? What paperwork?" I asked innocently. "All the stuff with your old addresses on it," she replied. I relaxed. "Oh, I don't need anything but my noggin," I said, comically tapping the side of my head. "You haven't moved around much, huh?" she assumed, smiling. "Well, I didn't as a child, but since college I have had 7 moves," I counted. "I was in the Air Force for 4 years," I added as if this was an explanation. "You have nearly 10 addresses, and you have them all memorized?" She pulled up a chair next to me, much to my dismay. I didn't like people watching me type. It made me nervous, and I hit more wrong keys than I normally would. Yeah." I scooted my chair over a tad to make room for her. "Impressive." "Not really," I dismissed. "I've always had a good memory for anything with numbers in it. Addresses, phone numbers, birthdays, stuff like that." I located the security clearance application file and opened it. She stared at the screen. I hesitated. "Well, come on. I want to watch your brain at work," she coaxed. "Are you sure you don't have something more exciting to do? Like, I don't know, floss?" She immediately covered her mouth with her hand. "Why, do I have something in my teeth? Shit, that's embarrassing," she exclaimed, while she pulled a small compact mirror out of her suit jacket pocket and peered at her teeth in it, making funny faces as she did so. No, you don't. Sorry," I apologized. "I was just making awkward conversation. A bit of a nervous typer, I guess," I chuckled, glancing at my hands hovering over the keyboard. She sighed with relief and put the mirror away. "I'll leave you to it, then." She stood to leave. "You don't have to leave," I pleaded. "I'll just be a few minutes." "Take your time." She walked across the room, and we went about our respective business for the next 10 minutes, my fingers clicking away on the keys until my application was complete. When I stood to leave, I arched my chest to stretch my back and released an involuntary grunt that got Agent Moss's attention. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm just not used to all the sitting," I replied. I started to gather my things as she hunched back over the computer she was trying to shut down, but something stopped me. There was that feeling again. Don't leave. Keep talking. I wasn't going to ignore it. It had served me well last time. "Can I ask you something?" She turned to me, curious. "Sure." "Did you always want to be an agent?" I started. She took a deep breath. "Really?" It was a big one to start with, I admit. I nodded. She looked around the room, then cracked her neck, first left, then right. Another deep breath. Did she not know the answer, or did she not want to tell me? Finally, she spoke. "My dad was an agent. It just seemed natural. By the time I was 10, I knew it's what I wanted." "So how long have you been an agent?" 21 years. "Are you kidding?" I responded, sincerely shocked. "Okay, woman to woman. How old are you? Because I was guessing around 38. She grinned and blushed just a little. "I'm 45. Holy shit. Not only was she nice, but now she was a hot 45-year-old, which is much more annoying than a hot 38-year-old, especially to a mediocre 40-year-old. And still, I wanted nothing more at that moment than to continue the connection. I decided to go for broke. "Did you ever regret it?" I asked tentatively, hoping she wouldn't suddenly transform into the bitch I had expected on the first day. "Sure." That surprised me. I thought about giving it all up to find Mr. Right and have some kids. Always thought I'd be a mom, but it just didn't happen. And now it's a little late for kids, but I haven't given up on Mr. Right. Not yet, anyway. "But it's been worth it. I mean, if you could go back, would you turn down the FBI?" She smirked, thinking hard. I used to be able to answer that question, but now... What's changed? She gave a heavy sigh and, glancing at the ceiling, obviously weighing whether or not to tell me what she was really thinking. "You." "Me?" She took a deep breath before she began. "When I heard a 40-year-old mom was going to try to be an agent, I didn't expect... you. Here we go. Freya, I'd like to introduce you to Agent Bitch." She leaned in closer to me. "If you tell anyone I said this, I'll deny it, but... I'm known in the Bureau for my good instincts, which is why I get the newbies who come in thinking they're going to be drop-kicking drug lords the first week." She laughed at her own joke while I leaned away, afraid I had tapped a powder keg. She noticed my unease and backed away. "Anyway, I've got a good feeling about you. If you can handle the physical and psychological aspects of the job like I think you can, you'll be a field agent, and a damn good one, in 6 months." She stood upright again and turned to push a stray chair under the table. "I won't tell a soul." I didn't know how to tell her she had just reaffirmed my entire existence, but I had to say something. "Thank you." I hoped that was enough. At the risk of pushing my luck, I asked, "So what does all that have to do with whether or not you regret being an agent?" "I don't regret being an agent. I just kind of wish I had done it the way you are. You know, perfect husband, perfect kids, and then become an agent, when I finally had some brains." This made me laugh. Well, I think perfect is a relative term, and I still feel like I've gone completely insane sometimes. But so far it's the fun kind of insane. "I know exactly what you mean." She looked down at the floor and then back at me, taking a breath. I sensed the deep conversation was over. "So, when does the training get hard?" I asked. "'Cause I gotta tell you, if there's much more sitting, I may have to rethink this life-changing decision of mine." I was kidding. Sort of. Agent Moss smiled. "Don't worry, the real training doesn't start until Phase 2. "So, Phase 2 is when the fun begins," I joked. She chuckled. "Oh yeah, just not for you."
You're listening to Big World Network.